I'm Carolyn Siegfried, and I'm the Executive Director of the Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation, and I'm just so delighted to see so many people here today to learn some very important information about funding your post-secondary education. So, as you may know, the Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation really supports Livermore students through the awarding scholarships and other resources and programming. And one of those other things that we do is want to share the information about financial aid that's available to everybody. So I can just get a show of hands. Can you raise your hand if you live here in Livermore? Okay, so that's the majority. How about Pleasanton and Dublin? Okay, so a couple people from Dublin as well. And then also, just so we can get a sense of the age of your children and the age of families, how many of you have students that are currently seniors in high school? Okay. How about juniors? Sophomores? Great. Freshmen? Fantastic. And younger? Oh, fabulous. So this is great. And college or existing in college already. So thank you very much for being here. So I would initially like to invite our Alameda County Supervisor, Scott Haggerty, to come forward because he has an announcement.
And then with him, I'd like to invite up our board president and president-elect Brian Balaz and Kathy Coyle.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And Congressman Swalwell, I see you waiting, so I'll be brief. It's a video. Well, I heard it was Skype, so, you know, I'll take my time, then he can wait. I got to applaud some of you. 8th graders, parents raised their hands. No, I applaud you. You're here. My son was just accepted to the University of Alabama, and it's not cheap. And it's really amazing, and it's very thoughtful that you start at the 8th grade level to start thinking about this, of how you're going to pay for your son or your daughter's education. Whether they do California universities, whether they go out of state, it's expensive, the housing, everything. So last year, I think in, what month was that? In June, I went to a thing for the Livermore Unified School District in which they were passing out grants, and all of a sudden the Pedrozzi Foundation came up, and I was amazed. I watched them give away $393,000 to 122 students. Yeah. I mean, I saw a lot of parents breathing a sigh of relief. I saw a lot of happy kids acknowledging the hard work that they had done to get to a position in which they could. And you know, 20% of those were first-time college students. So, but it doesn't stop there. I think when you think about what the Pedrozzi Foundation has done since 2008, they have given away $2.7 million to students in here in the Livermore Unified School District. So I just wanted to stop by. When people do great things in my district, I like to have the ability to be able to acknowledge them. So I will be giving Brian and the rest of the board members and Carolyn a commendation on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, signed by all 5 members of the board, and it really kind of goes through a little bit of the history of the Pedrozzi Foundation. And you know what? Thank God they're here in this community, and thank God that they're helping us get our children educated. So with that, you now have a piece of one shot. We did good.
Yeah, we did.
I guess we always do good. Okay.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much to Supervisor Haggerty for stopping by this evening to join us. So as you know, in our advertisement for this evening's presentation is done in conjunction with Congressman Eric Swalwell's office. And the Congressman is in Washington, D.C. this evening, so can't be here with us, but wanted to have a message, so we videotaped a message for all of us. Let's hear from the Congressman.
Hello, I'm Congressman Eric Swalwell, and I represent California's 15th Congressional District, which includes much of the East Bay. Can't join you here tonight because I'm voting back in Washington, D.C., but I appreciate all of you attending this event to educate yourselves on financial aid available for higher education. I also want to thank the Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation and Colette Hadley from the National College Access Network for hosting this important event. Attending college is one of the most important decisions you can make in your young lives. It's also increasingly necessary in our global economy. By 2018, 63% of the new jobs out there will require a college education. As you and your families look forward, I'm sure you are feeling a lot of excitement for the future, but perhaps also some anxiety as you contemplate the cost of higher education, which continues to rise quickly. I understand how each and every one of you are feeling. I was the first person in my family to go to college and took out student loans myself to pay for it. The experts here tonight will be able to walk you through this process and point you to resources that will help you pay for college, helping you reduce the cost and any debt you may have upon graduation. I also want you to know that I am working in Congress to reduce the cost of college. I am leading a group of young members of Congress called Future Forum. Future Forum is focused on reducing the cost of college and making it easier for young people like you to pay back your student loans once you graduate. For example, I am fighting to make possible for every student to attend a public university debt-free, and signed on to legislation that would allow borrowers to refinance their student debt after graduation, the same way that everyone can finance home and auto loans. These, I believe, are just a few steps we have to take, to support students and their families. As you embark on this next chapter, please consider me and my office as a resource on student loans in higher education. We are happy to help constituents navigate what can sometimes be a confusing process. Call us anytime. 925-460-5100 in the Tri-Valley or 510-370-3322. You can also keep up to date with my activities at home in the East Bay and DC by following me on Twitter @Rep Swalwell or on Facebook at facebook.com/Congressman Eric Swalwell. Thank you again. Enjoy the evening and good luck in your college search.
The Congressman's staff can take back your applause to him. So I'd like to now introduce Colette Hadley, is the Director of Consulting Services with the National College Access Network, and she will be our presenter this evening. In her role at NCAN, Ms. Hadley helps a wide variety of organizations deploy best practices in college access and financial aid advising services. She has unparalleled credentials and commitment to help communities increase the rate of college going and completion. From 2006 through early 2015, she was the executive director of the Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara, while she led the foundation through phenomenal growth. In addition to recently awarding scholarships to almost 3,000 Santa Barbara County residents, the foundation's program advisors reached more than 37,600 Santa Barbara County students and parents with rigorous FAFSA, and you'll hear all about that this evening, training, targeted scholarship workshops, early awareness financial aid presentations such as this one, and intensive one-on-one counseling sessions. The Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation has benefited numerous times from Colette's advice, and we're very grateful that she's here this evening to share her expertise with our community. Please welcome Colette Hadley.
Well, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. I usually have a loud voice. Often I don't even need a microphone. So if I'm shouting, I'm sorry about that, but hopefully you can hear me. and I'll try to keep myself trained here on the microphone. Carolyn, thank you for that nice introduction. As she told you, currently I'm actually working with a group called the National College Access Network, which is an association I and a few other people helped found about 20 years ago, and it's an association of scholarship providers and what we call college access programs all across the country. And I've spent the last 23 years in Santa Barbara County working with the Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara County, the last about 10 of those as the CEO. Prior to that, I was the director of programs, so I designed their scholarship processes and their financial aid counseling program and all of those things. So we're fortunate in Santa Barbara County that we have the Scholarship Foundation there. It's a public nonprofit that's been around since 1962. And as Carolyn mentioned, you have about 3,000 awards, almost $9 million this year, which is actually the largest community scholarship provider in the nation. So there's definitely people that will donate money for scholarships for their community. And I know the community here is generous as well. So we're going to take a look tonight. The name of the presentation is Looking Forward, Paying for College. Maybe we'll move on to our first slide. Thanks. Sherry's agreed to be my human slide clicker. Thank you. And, you know, so these are some of the topics we're going to talk about. I have to tell you that financial aid is not a very sexy subject. Okay? It's, listen, I've been working in this industry for a long time, the financial aid world and college access, and I still find it pretty boring. So I have to say that if you're new to it, you won't find it any more exciting than I do. But it's one of those necessary things to know. And I think it's a mystery to some people, although I have to tell you, if I can learn it, anyone can learn it. So don't worry about thinking it's this opaque thing and it's too complex to learn. It's just one of those things that you need to take step by step. That's all it is. And I know it's called Paying for College, but I have to tell you, this presentation is meant to be, as Carolyn said, about financial aid for post-secondary education. The distinguishing thing there is I want you to understand that this is about people who also, someone might want to go to any other type of education after secondary level, post-secondary education. That might be career technical education. It might be a 6-month certificate of program, a year certification program, a 2-year college, a 4-year college, in-state, out-of-state, public, private, okay? Graduate and medical school, maybe beyond that, professional school, that sort of thing. So don't think it's just about, only about 4-year school or just about bachelor's degrees and not about some of these other things as well. We're just using college as a catch-all phrase, okay? So the topics tonight you can see up there, hopefully, what we're gonna talk about. Don't those look exciting? See, everybody's already, yeah. So I hope that you ate dinner already and your stomach won't growl too much, but try to hang in there with me. Let's go on to the next slide. And it should say philosophy of financial aid. And I bring this up because I think some people don't really understand, they just think financial aid, money to help me go to college. But there is actually a philosophy behind it that the colleges, the college financial aid offices are starting from, okay? And this doesn't vary by college. This is pretty much the starting basis. And I bring this up so you understand that the beginning philosophy is that parents have the primary responsibility to pay for their child's post-secondary education. Okay? They don't have the primary responsibility. The government doesn't. I don't. That this is their first assumption. Okay? Think about that. That's the first assumption. That doesn't mean there's not help available, but you have to know that you're going to play a role. Okay? They also expect that your students have some responsibility to contribute. That could be from a summer job, it could be from savings. They do expect that students have a role, that they're not just going to school for 4 years or more years with no role in helping pay for that, okay? And they also believe that the financial position of families should be evaluated in sort of an objective and standardized method. So they have one federal methodology that's used, one federal form that's used to gather information from families to help determine eligibility for financial aid. And I'd just like to mention that there's also a few things that I guess you could call myths about financial aid. And I know everybody in here is going to have varying levels of knowledge about financial aid. I know some of you who are just starting out, and I know some of you who have already researched every topic and everything, and you're hoping to find one little kernel tonight that will add to your already great deal of knowledge about what you know about college financial aid. But I have to say that still people sometimes don't understand the truths about it. One of them is I have constantly students and parents say to me they have to have a great GPA to qualify for financial aid. You don't, okay? Not for most aid. Now, do you want to do as well as you can to get admitted to a school? Yes, okay, to the school of your choice. But, you know, keep in mind that in this great state of California, our California community college system, which helps students who are honor students and students who are returning students and students who are remaking themselves. To get admitted to a community college, you need to be 18 or have a high school diploma. Okay? So even if you have a student who had a very modest high school achievement record, they can remake themselves at a community college. Honor students go to community college and participate in the honor program. It's a great entree into higher education. Of course, we have the Cal State system and the UC system. But people think you need a great GPA to qualify for financial aid. In general, financial aid is looking at your need and your finances. Okay? Secondly, I know a lot of people will say, well, you know, I have 2 kids. My older child didn't qualify for grants, so we're not going to bother to apply because my second one's not going to qualify. You know, what people don't understand is the federal methodology takes into account how many children in your family are in college at the same time. So if you do have 2 in college, you might not have qualified with 1, but you may qualify with 2. Okay? And I also talk to people who say, you know, I know my neighbors really well, my friends, you know, we have similar situations. They didn't qualify, so I don't know that we should even apply. Why should we bother and do these forms? And I have to tell you that one of the things that I have to impress upon you is that life doesn't remain the same. Okay, what I mean by that is every year that I was at the Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara, broke my heart, but every year, every cohort of high school seniors we worked with, from the time that October applications came out till May awards were made, at least 4 of them would lose a parent. Many more than that had parents get ill, seriously ill, and not be able to work. Life doesn't remain the same. Anything can happen at any time. That's not to scare you. That's to say, keep your options open. I can't believe how many people self-select. They're like, we're not going to do a FAFSA form. We'll just take out a student loan. You can't get a federal student loan without doing the FAFSA form, which is the federal form, okay? Do the FAFSA form. Follow the instructions, do the forms. If somebody offers you $1,000 to go to school and you don't want it, you can say no, okay? You can say no. They don't care, it doesn't hurt their feelings, all right? Let's go on to the next slide. So, what is financial aid? Seems pretty obvious, but the definition, given, paid, or loaned to help pay for college expenses. 2 categories, gift aid and what's called self-help aid. Gift aid, grants and scholarships. In the old days, that would be back when I was in college, a long time ago, there was a differentiation between those. Grants were generally need-based, free money you don't pay back. Scholarships were generally merit-based, no need was looked at, money you didn't pay back. They're used interchangeably now. Those terms are used interchangeably out in the big wide world. So when you see grant or scholarship, just know that that's money that you're not paying back, it's free money, okay? And self-help aid means aid in which you're needing, they're giving you aid, but there is a self-help component. Work study is another word or term for a job on campus that is administered through the financial aid office. We're going to talk about that. And of course, we know the word loan, okay? And I think a lot of people don't understand that actually in the federal student loan system, there are student loans and there are parent loans. And we're going to talk about both of those as well. And sometimes families are using both of those, sometimes. All right, let's go on to the next slide. The next slide is the basic equation of financial need. Okay, this doesn't vary by college. This is the same, okay? So it's the cost of attendance, which is the COA, minus the expected family contribution, which is termed EFC, and that equals your financial need eligibility. The College Financial Aid Office will attempt to offer enough financial aid to meet your financial need eligibility, okay? They may not. They might leave a gap. And they might package some financial aid in a way that you like or you don't like. But that's their goal. Their goal is to attempt to offer you enough aid to meet your evaluated need, all right? So let's elaborate on these terms a little bit. Okay, cost of attendance, what is that? Okay, the cost of attendance is not just tuition. Okay, cost of attendance is the entire cost they estimate it would be for your student to be at that campus for that year. Now, generally, they're also including living expenses, as you can see, books and supplies, School supplies, personal supplies, transportation, sometimes insurance, miscellaneous campus fees. Schools work up their own budgets, okay? They work up their own budgets. So you might be wondering, well, how do they know some of these? Well, of course, here in California, the public university system, the UCs and Cal States, those levels of fees are set by the legislature, okay, and the UC regions. Those are set, all right? They're told, every campus is told what they're charging for that. Beyond that, room and board and other things, how do they estimate that? Well, they know what they're charging to live in their dorms, and they know what they're charging to be on a meal plan. So how do they find out some of these other things? Actually, most of the UC campuses, or some participate in one, survey students, current students, a selection of them every couple of years, and say, okay, how much are you spending on books? How much are you spending on personal supplies? That's like shampoo and things like that. How much are you spending on these things to get an average of what it's costing a student to live in their dorm and go to the school? So the source isn't completely pie in the sky. We do have some reality based on it, but just, you know, just remember, they're not planning that these are students living large, okay? This is living in the dorm, this is eating burritos. This isn't a situation where they expect you to be driving a fancy car and eating gourmet food every night. These cost of attendance are based on a realistic living for a student. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. There we go. Cost of attendance. Here you can see that these COA figures are generally the figures for 1 year of college this year living on campus, okay? Now, you're saying, why does a community college say $13,000? It's because the community colleges actually do have a cost of attendance budget if you are living not at your parents' house, you know, in an apartment or on campus. There are a few of them that have some on-campus apartments. But of the community college cost, almost 11.5 of that is living expenses and other things, okay? The registration fees on that are a lot less, about $1,500. But Cal State, $23,000, UC, $33,000. Those are pretty much the all-in price for a year, living in the dorm, regular meal plan, registration, books, okay? The last figure, private college, is $55,000. That's really a median, okay? There are some small private religious colleges scattered throughout the country that are very small, and small arts ones that are less than that. And there's quite a few that are more than that, okay? Other private colleges that are more than that are more like 60, some are approaching 65, okay? So keep in mind that they're setting the cost of attendance, and that will vary by institution. But in general, for Cal States and UCs, that's about the average for this upcoming year, okay? Might vary by about $500 here or there. If we go to the next slide, you can see a little bit more detail on the CSU and UC campus budgets. So these categories they publish. Sometimes they include, usually UC includes the health insurance cost to be on their plan. Cal State works a little differently. But you can see generally this is what they've estimated. It's about, as you can see for this upcoming year, about $6,700 in fees for CSU, about $13,300 for UC. All right, and then you can see the living expenses and the total down there at the bottom. So that's really what they're estimating when they look at this cost of attendance. Remember that basic equation we're going to go back to. It's cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals financial need eligibility, and we're going to go back to that. So that would be their starting point if your student were going to, you know, Cal State East Bay or Cal State Northridge or San Diego State or UC, you know, UCLA or Berkeley or UC Davis, any of those. Okay, let's go on to the next term, expected family contribution. Expected family contribution, you're going to hear EFC, 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 and you're going to think it's like a stock ticker or something, because people talk about it all the time when you're going to talk about financial aid. They'll talk about FAFSA and EFC. The EFC stands for expected family contribution. That's a calculated contribution figure representing, as it says, what parents and students are supposed to contribute to the annual college cost. And here's what it's primarily based on. The calculation that they use to get to this EFC number is called the federal methodology, and it is something that the U.S. Department of Education looks at every single year. And it's a particular formula that's based on information you provide to them on one form, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But it's been designed by the U.S. Department of Education to be that one federal standard they'll use to evaluate applicants across the country. Okay? So there isn't a FAFSA just for California and a FAFSA for Maryland and a FAFSA for Texas. There's one FAFSA for the whole country, a federal financial aid form. So how is this information collected to determine the EFC? You're going to complete what's called a free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA for short, and we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, there you can see FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. Now, students must complete this federal FAFSA form online to be considered for financial aid, and this is if you want a student loan, if you want student grants, if you want work study, if you want any of those things, you need to do the FAFSA form. That is, your student needs to do the FAFSA form, okay? It's done online at the website I've listed here. It's also in the handout materials. There is an actually forecaster on the FAFSA website called FAFSA Forecaster. So if you're wondering ahead of time how you might be evaluated, you can plug in some numbers to the FAFSA Forecaster EFC estimate. Okay. Keep in mind that a small number of private colleges also ask for a separate financial aid form, just to make this more fun for you. Public universities do not. They all use the FAFSA. But there are some private colleges that ask for a form called Profile. It's actually called CSS Profile. It's actually a form from the College Board, and it has many more questions than the FAFSA. The FAFSA has between 80 and 100 questions, depending on your status and how you fill that out. The Profile form has double that, easy. But the Profile form asks you more questions, more in depth about your financial situation. Why that's used by some private colleges is because some elite private colleges have very large endowments, money that maybe they've collected from you, one of their alumni, and others that they've raised money from. They use a certain portion of that for financial aid, what's called institutional aid, and we're going to get to that, which is money from the college itself that they've raised. In order to dole that out, they want a lot more information about you than the FAFSA form uses, okay? Actually, I'm going to take questions at the end. Thank you. And just keep in mind that when they're looking at their institutional money, if they don't think the FAFSA is enough information, they'll ask for this. How do you know if they want Profile? Because not every private school does. First of all, the public schools do not ask for it. Second of all, you can tell on any website from any private college if they ask for it. It's right on there, okay, if they need it. And I'll give you some examples of popular schools that do ask for Profile: Stanford, Brown, Caltech, Claremont McKenna, Columbia, Harvard, MIT. Some examples that ask for Profile, okay? You don't have to do both FAFSA and Profile. I recommend you do, but you don't have to, okay? Keep that in mind. And they may ask if it's a divorced family, the Profile form may even ask for non-custodial parent information as well. All right, let's go back to our basic equation of financial need. So here you can see the cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals financial need eligibility. Look at it again with the college budgets, and here's something you want to remember. The cost of attendance will vary from institution to institution. The expected family contribution is a constant. It does not vary. You fill out one FAFSA form each year, you get one EFC number. That's the same EFC number used by Stanford, used by UC Berkeley, used by UCLA, used by San Diego State, okay? The expected family contribution number does not change, but the cost of attendance and the financial aid eligibility will change based on the institution, okay? All right, let's go on. So let's talk about the 4 sources of aid. It gets really exciting now. I can tell everybody's really excited. Okay, 4 sources of aid. This is actually, I explain it this way because it's the easiest way for me to remember it. You might decide to do this a little bit differently and organize it differently in your brain, but I usually do this by sources of aid. So when we're talking about this, people ask me, well, there's federal, state, institutional, and what's called outside agency aid. Which one should I apply to? All of them, okay? You can and should apply to all of them, all sources of aid. So let's go through them one by one in some detail. As I said, it gets even more exciting. So let's talk about federal aid. Types of aid from the federal government. This is some of that taxes you pay every year, can come back to you in the form of federal aid. So there are grants. Remember I mentioned grants, free money you don't pay back. There's 2 particular grants, one called Pell Grant after Senator Claiborne Pell many years ago. One's called SEOG Grant, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. There's Work Study, which are jobs on campus, and we're going to go through each one of these. Student loans, subsidized and unsubsidized, Stafford and direct loans, and Perkins loan, we're going to go through those, and what's called the Parent Plus loan, okay? What's called the Parent Plus loan. And by the way, not only, there's a handout there for you that kind of summarizes all these things, but if you want a copy of this presentation, you can email Pedrozzi and they can send you a copy of it too, okay? Okay, let's go on to the next one, which talks about grants and work study. It's kind of wordy, and I don't really have to read the whole thing to you, but basically, you need to know that federal grants, Pell Grants and SEOG grants, are reserved for the most financially needy, period, okay? Generally, those with EFCs of 5,000 or less, as I've mentioned on here. And again, remember you can go and you can estimate your EFC at the FAFSA forecaster site. The Pell Grant maximum this year is it's a little under 6,000, and the SEOG maximum was about 4,000. There are students who have both of those, okay? Work study. Work study is also something that is, I know you're thinking it's a job, but they're usually very good jobs on campus. Often you can get one in your particular area of study if you're a chemistry major and you want to work in a chemistry lab. Some of those things, they give first priority usually to work study students. Federal work study funds are allocated at the discretion of the college campus. Okay? Generally, the student needs to have financial need, but they're not necessarily reserved for the neediest. You might use some of these for people who are more in the middle range of need. It's up to that college campus. How do you get a federal work study award? You fill out the FAFSA. Okay? One FAFSA. And they're actually really very helpful. They often give students some extra experience as well. So let's talk about loans. There's a lot of information on there. This is also in your handout, okay? So don't have to write it all down. But keep in mind some of these terms. Even if it's a few years from now until your student's in college, take this in, okay? If your student's a senior, pay attention to these terms, subsidized and unsubsidized. So you can read about it up there, okay? So subsidized, unsubsidized, and Perkins loans are all in the name of the student, okay? Those three are all in the name of the student. Subsidized loans are generally offered to students who have the most financial need. Unsubsidized loans are not need-based, okay? Perkins loan is also it's just a separate little crazy loan program, but it's also for the students with the most need. There's a lot of middle income or upper middle income families that might have an unsubsidized student loan each year to help them pay for college. It's not uncommon. You can see there's limits, the federal loan limits, if you look down at the bottom. They vary by year. So the first year up to $5,500, second year $6,500, and $7,500 the third and fourth years. That can change from year to year. I doubt it's ever going to go down, but that's the level it is at right now, okay? The last loan listed on here, Parent Plus loans, this is a loan in the parent's name. So, you can, as a parent, just so you know, you can borrow up to the full cost of the education in the Plus loan program. Okay, you can do that. I don't know that I would recommend that, depending on the cost at the school and your situation, but you can. Okay, so keep that in mind. Families are allowed to have student loans and parent loans at the same time if they'd like. All right. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about FAFSA tips. The FAFSA filing period right now this year opens January 1st if you have a senior. It generally has been that way forever. There is a change coming next year for those of you that have younger students I'll talk about. But the California priority deadline is March 2nd, okay? So your goal is to file it online sometime between January 1st and March 2nd. If you miss March 2nd, still file it, even if it's March 3rd. Still file it, but the priority deadline is March 2nd. So if they have some institutional aid or other small pots of aid, they're going to give it to the priority people first. All right? The website's listed on here. The first thing you do is sign up for what's called an FSA, or Federal Student Aid ID. Just like when you go to any website where you have to have a username and an ID. This is so you can access your FAFSA form, go back in, make corrections. You'll keep the same FSA ID, that student will, all the time they're in college. All right? Keep in mind that each student has to have their own form. If you have twins, they each have to have their own FAFSA. If you have a 12th grader right now and an 11th grader behind them, they each have to have their own FAFSA. You don't file before they're a high school senior, okay? You only do this when they're a high school senior and older. And you have to do a form every year, okay? It gets easier as you go because In the succeeding years, they will pre-populate it and you will just have to update information. All right, but you have to do it every year. New this year, the FSA ID is new, so if any of you have students already in college and you've done the FAFSA before, they had what was called the FAFSA PIN. Is that anybody? Okay, they had what was called the FAFSA PIN. They've done away with the FAFSA PIN, and now you have to have an FSA ID. Okay, the other thing is there's, you might have noticed President Obama made an announcement last week that is actually in my world, the college access world, a big deal. But it is, they're going to something with the FAFSA called prior year. What that means is when you fill out the FAFSA right now, when you do it January 1st, okay, they're asking you questions about, if it's January 1st, 2016, they're asking you questions about your 2015 financial year, okay? Very hard to do it right away January 1st. Very few people know right away how their 15 year went. They might have to wait for W-2s and other things to do that. But the deal is that usually you wait till January 1st and the filing period starts then in your senior year. And you report on the immediate prior year. What they're starting next fall, not the seniors this year, but the juniors and beyond, is something called prior year. So the window will open earlier. It'll open in October for the FAFSA. And you will then use your data from the prior year, not the prior year, not the immediate prior year. So if that were in case right now, you would be using your data from 2014 rather than 2015. Does that make sense? Nodding heads? They'll tell you on the form, you know, we need, this is the information we're asking for da-da-da year. But pay attention to that. Why are they doing that? One, because gosh, it's kind of hard to get your immediate information that fast from your immediate prior year. And number two, we wanted to open the window earlier so you could know earlier what your financial aid eligibility would be. So it would help you have more time to think about choosing colleges. Okay? So that will be changing. Keep that in mind. It'll be big announcements, but it'll be changing. It's not for the seniors this year. It's for next year and beyond. All right? Let's go on. All right, this is a question that people often get wrong. So what is required on the FAFSA? Who fills out the FAFSA? Well, the student is the applicant. The student is the applicant. The parent's not the applicant. The student is the applicant. And they will ask a series of questions to determine if the student is classified as dependent, which 90% or more of you are, or independent. And a lot of people think that depends on whether or not they claim their child on their tax return or whatever. No, it doesn't. They get to decide, not you, okay? So there's a few questions they're going to ask. They're going to ask they're going to ask the student, how old is the student? If the student is 24 years or older, they're automatically considered independent. They're going to ask, is the student married? If the student's married, they're considered independent. They're going to ask the student, do you have a child? Do you, the student, have a child? If the student has a child, they're independent. They're going to ask the student, are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Yes or no? No? If you're not, you're dependent, still on your parents. They're going to ask them, are you a ward of the court or have you been in foster care? Are you currently in foster care? If the answer to that is yes, you're independent. But if your answer to all those is no, you're considered dependent. Okay? So you have to provide parental information. The next question for people is, so it doesn't matter if you claim them on your tax return, doesn't matter if you don't like them, doesn't matter if you're like, I'm not paying for college education because you're not worth it, doesn't matter. That applicant has to include parental information, okay? There's some special living situations, 10%, who are independent by circumstance, not by choice. In other words, their parents are deceased, okay? Their parents are incarcerated, other things that might be going on, very severe things. And believe me, financial aid offices know how to verify everything, okay? It's very hard to fool them, okay? They're very good at this. Lots of parents think they know how to get around this, and it's not easy to do. So keep in mind, your students are classified dependent. Then they want to know who am I supposed to list on here? We're divorced, or we're co-parenting, or we're not married but we're living together, or somebody's remarried, or they're living half and half in my household. Well, here's the kind of things you want to think about. So, I've tried to put down as many things I can think of, but you have parents married and living together. Both parents go on, and the student lives in their household. Think about the household the student lives in. The household the student lives in. Okay? Parents not married but living together. For FAFSA, they are considered a common law marriage for FAFSA purposes. They would both go on the form. Okay? A parent is widowed and not remarried, would just be their surviving parent on there. Okay? Parents are divorced or separated, not living together, have not remarried. It's the parent the student lived with the most in their senior year. If you have a divorce agreement that says the student has to live exactly 50-50 with each parent, which I've seen lots of times, then you need to put down the information of the parent who provided the most financial support in the last year. Okay? Parents divorced, not living together, a parent has remarried, so the student lives with parent and step-parent. It is parent and step-parent who go on the form. Don't goof that up. Don't put in bio information from another household. If the student is living, if the parents are divorced and the student's living with dad and stepmom, it is dad and stepmom that goes on the form. Bio mom might be in town and in his life, but that's not the household he lives in. All right? Last one, if there's no parent information required, it would be because of one of these reasons. And these are verifiable things. They'll ask for court papers to verify these things. Okay? If a student is living in an unusual situation, like living with grandma or living with an aunt or a brother or something because there's a parent unavailable, they really need to get special help on that. That's really less than like 3% of students. Most of them have a legal status if they have that. But they do not put usually their grandparent or their aunt or their brother on the form. They usually have to apply to the college and ask for an independent ruling. Okay? But you can get financial aid guidance on that from the college, people like me. Other people can help you with that. But just know that if you don't put the right information down on the FAFSA and it doesn't match up because they do an IRS match on this data, they're going to come back to you. Okay? You're going to slow the financial aid process down. You could even not get aid because of that. So you really need to think about this carefully, all right? And if you have a family household situation you want to talk about, just come up and see me at the end, okay? I can help you with that. All right, let's go on to the next one. That's federal aid. Now we're on state aid. But wait, I have a question before we go on to state aid. What was the name of the federal financial aid form? Okay, that's all you have to walk out remembering. Sorry, no. So, okay, we're on to state aid. How many sources of aid are there that I said? 4. Okay, we're only on number 2. All right, state aid. Okay, Cal Grant, California Middle Class Scholarship, or something called the Chafee Grant. All right, they've made this so easy now in our state. This used to be so hard even just a few years ago. Made it really easy. All you have to do is fill out a FAFSA form. Not another one, just the one you filled out. And then when you're a high school senior, make sure that your college uploads your GPA to the Cal Grant portal. Now, students up until last year in most high schools still had to fill out a form. You don't have to do that anymore. The legislature voted that high schools are required to upload all 12th grade GPAs to the Cal Grant portal for you, okay? But do check at your your high school guidance office to see if they have anything else they want to ask you. Some of them will say, if you fill out our form and put down your social security number, it makes it for a faster match with the FAFSA, okay? So you might want to do that, but even if you missed that, they're required to upload the GPA. The reason why they do that is Cal Grants, and there are 3 different types of Cal Grants, and the Middle Class Scholarship, some of these look at GPA, okay? Some of those look at GPA. So, as I put on here, after they're uploaded, California Student Aid Commission will match students with the federal FAFSA data, determining if you're eligible for state aid. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so the process. Fill out a FAFSA at the FAFSA website, or if your student is undocumented, you would fill out the California DREAM Act application, okay? The federal government does not offer aid to undocumented students, but California does. And there's a specific application called California DREAM Act application. And there's a specific website for it. Students are eligible for Cal Grants, so they'll need to fill that one out instead of the FAFSA, okay? The school registrar or counseling office, it varies from school to school, will upload your GPA to CSAC, which is the California Student Aid Commission. You don't have to complete a separate application, but you want to be aware of the process because you want to be checking your status for Cal Grants and making sure that if they've awarded you something, that you do the proper steps to accept it so it doesn't go away, okay? So that you can get it. Let's talk about the types of Cal Grants and a little bit of that process. Okay, 3 types of Cal Grants. This is when it gets really boring. I need a drink of water, sorry. You're such an attentive audience. Usually by now I've lost a few people. Although I see maybe a few sleepy heads back there. But okay, so there's 3 types of Cal grants. This is a lot of detail. You don't have to worry about this because you don't get to select. But if you want to know, okay, Cal Grant A is for use at 4-year schools, goes towards tuition and fees, and that does have a 3.0 GPA minimum, okay? We're going to talk about the income and asset ceilings, those on the next slide, but we're not there yet. Keep in mind that if your student starts at a community college, you still want to make sure you're in the Cal Grant process before they leave high school, okay? Still do that FAFSA, even if they're starting at community college and you think we can afford the community college, we're not going to fill out a FAFSA until they transfer. I recommend you do the FAFSA every year regardless, okay? You're already in the system. It's easier to do renewals. It's also important if you potentially have a transfer Cal Grant, okay? So if you do the federal FAFSA form and your GPA is uploaded and you meet their guidelines, they'll hold your Cal Grant for you until you transfer, okay? So you can see the amounts at CSU, UC, and private, the amounts they'll give, maximums. Cal Grant B is for 2 or 4-year schools, and generally this will go, it's a stipend that helps with living expenses. There isn't really a GPA that you need that's really fantastic, 2.0, but that's because that is a little bit of a stipend towards living expenses, and it generally has a lower threshold on the income and asset ceilings, okay, for financially needy students. Cal Grant C, if you have a student who's going to do career technical education, cosmetology, auto mechanics, lots of things, they potentially could get a Cal Grant C, and they might get a Cal Grant B if they're doing that at a community college, okay? Now, who decides? As I said in the little box, the state decides. The California Student Aid Commission decides what you're eligible for based on the guidelines. So you can see those guidelines. The next slide, I think, is the income and asset ceilings, hopefully, which I know are going to be hard for you to see, but again, we can email this to you. It's just hard to fit on one slide. But basically, you can see for Cal Grant B, the far right-hand column, remember I said that was a stipend towards living expenses? That one has pretty stringent income ceilings. Cal Grant A and C is a little more middle class. And if they're an independent student down at the bottom, it says that would be their own income, okay? So those are the income and asset ceilings for the Cal Grant program. And we're going to move on to the middle class scholarship program. This is from the state of California. This was put into place in 2014. It's new. They've only had a year or two to ramp up. You can see who qualifies. This is only for use in the UC or CSU system. U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and undocumented AB 540 all eligible. 2.0 GPA. Family income up to $150,000. They generally, incomes up to $100,000 are eligible for the most, between $101,000 and $150,000 are still eligible for some aid, but less. As you can see, it's kind of a sliding scale. It will vary on how much money the state has each year. Isn't that great? But the state has fully funded it the last several years, and it's expected to be in the budget this year, fully funded as well. It's not listed as in jeopardy. And so this is ramping up each year, actually, so it will pay up to 40% of tuition and fees from the state. Someone might have a Cal Grant and a middle class scholarship, okay? They could have both, or they could have one or either, depending on what their situation is. How do they get this? Fill out the FAFSA, make sure their GPA is uploaded, okay? All right, let's go on to one last slide, I think, on state aid. This is the web grants page. Again, these things are listed in your handout, but this is really important. There are students who are eligible for Cal Grants and they neglect to go back to the web grants page and look and see what they're eligible for and accept it or turn in additional documentation that's asked for. So please make sure that your students are on top of those things, paying attention. I know students prefer to text, but just so you know, everything at the college level from the college is done by email. All right? And we're going to talk about what you need to do with students' and parents' information a little bit and the philosophy behind that. I'm going to give you some advice on what you want to do with that at the end of the presentation. But just keep in mind, if you have a Cal Grant or a middle class scholarship and you take a leave of absence or do things, you need to report these things. Don't assume that, oh, all my aid will be there when I come back. You know, I didn't tell them anything, but they can read my mind. So they can't. Okay, you can't over-communicate enough with a state agency or a college. All right, you can only under-communicate. Keep that in mind. All right, third source of aid, institutional aid. That's a fancy term for financial aid from the college itself, as I don't know how to say it any other way. It's money from the institution, okay? So all types of schools, from community colleges to private colleges, have grant aid from their own foundations and financial aid programs. Remember I mentioned like big endowments that some schools have? Well, a lot of people overlook the fact that a number of community colleges have their own foundations and also offer institutional aid, okay? Keep in mind that at the four-year college level, as I've mentioned, students don't necessarily, usually, it can vary, have to complete a separate scholarship application. For example, for the UC, you just fill out the admissions application, and there's some questions on there that relate to some of their scholarships and their FAFSA, okay, and the FAFSA, and they can determine if you're eligible for any of their scholarships. There are a few at some UC campuses that are kind of narrow scholarships. If you're eligible for one of those, they will tell you, okay, if there's anything separate or supplemental to send in, but they've tried to streamline all of that. But at the two-year college level, a number of community colleges have their own foundations with their own scholarship application. Okay? Generally, those open, it's up to the campus, but generally they'll open around January 1st and be due March 2nd. They try to match the FAFSA. Okay? So don't assume if you're going to a community college that you shouldn't apply for scholarships there as well, okay, for separate money from the institution. UC system has something called the Blue and Gold Opportunity Plan. That's institutional money. So if a family income up to $80,000 with a 2.0 GPA minimum, if you complete the FAFSA or the DREAM Act application, they will cover the tuition and fees up to $12,000. If it's not already covered by some other aid, they'll make up the difference. Okay, so keep all that in mind. You've got to check. Some of the private colleges, some four-years have separate applications. It's an easy email. Do you have any separate scholarship application for your college's institutional aid? Okay, not going to have to do that at the UC, but keep that in mind for others. Or just look at their website. The colleges have websites that are chock-a-block full of information. If you go and you just search under financial aid, they always have a scholarship section, and they'll tell you. All right? Next one, California Community Colleges. There's something called the Board of Governors Fee Waiver, the BOG. This is for very financially needy students, but you need to know about it because most of them, I'm not sure your status in this room, but most of the students, at least half of them that are eligible, don't even know about it. Okay? So if you know students that are going to the California Community College and they're not applying, they need to know about this. Okay? So how do they get it? They fill out a FAFSA. Okay? And some community colleges have an additional one-page form, which I don't think they should, but some do. And again, that will be on their website, but it will waive their fees. Okay? And there are students who are the children of veterans, regardless of their financial status, and some of them will qualify as well. Okay. Let's move on to the fourth source of aid, outside agencies. Okay? Outside agency, private scholarship providers. Pedrozzi is a private scholarship provider. Okay? The Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara that I mentioned, where I work, and used to work in Santa Barbara County, is a private scholarship provider. The Kiwanis is a private scholarship provider. The Rotary is a private scholarship provider. Okay? So how do you know about those things? Two things you want to do. One, especially when you're a senior, stop talking during class and pay attention to every announcement and every bulletin that comes out. Parents, if you're getting an email if you're not checking the counseling office online, if you're not going into the counseling office, and students, start doing that, please. You usually can't apply for most of these until you're a senior, okay? But many of local groups will put their materials at the high school counseling office. Every high school does it differently. Some keep a file cabinet, some keep a notebook where they put notices. But that'll be everything from, like I say, Elks to Kiwanis to Rotary, service clubs, okay? Anything randomly that comes their way from local groups. But the other thing you want to do is an internet scholarship search, and there's a couple of websites that I do recommend that are the most comprehensive and have the biggest lists. And I've put them on the handout, and I'll tell you those in a minute. But here's what you want to think about with private scholarships, is a lot of people overlook certain things. So we talked about Service Club, Elks, Kiwanis, Rotary. Lots of heritage groups give scholarships. Sometimes they don't get enough applications. I can't tell you how many counties I go to, and the Swedish American Club tells me they got 2 applications. The Italian American Association got 2 applications. Okay? It's not because there aren't people of Swedish and Italian heritage in that town. It's because they're not getting enough information out as much as they can, and you're not seeing it, or it's there and you're not seeing it. Okay? You've got to pay attention. You've got to pay attention to what's happening in the bulletins and at the counseling office. Some of these will come up through FastWeb and some of the other scholarship searchers I'll tell you about, because some of the groups have managed to list themselves in that way. But think of your heritage, think of your family heritage. Think of employer groups. There's big employer groups, oil companies, insurance companies, utility companies who offer scholarships. Okay, some are for children of employees. Your parent's employer may offer something. Or some of them are just if you want to be in the utility field, you want to work in that. So think of career things as well. Professional associations of nurses, doctors. They want to help people who want to be nurses. They want to help people who want to do that. Accountants, lawyers. Professional associations offer scholarships, and most of them say, you know, we've got a great recipient, but we always want more applicants. We always want more applicants, okay? There is a myth, though, that people think, you know, and if people try to tell you that nonsense, there's millions of unclaimed scholarships, there aren't. There aren't millions of unclaimed scholarships out there just waiting for you. There's a few at some colleges that were designed 50 years ago, and the specific criteria on that doesn't even exist anymore. Like somebody has to know how to shoe a horse. Okay, that's like one person, and nobody that's going to their college. And those couple of funds are sitting there. But most colleges have gone to court and converted those funds to useful things. Like maybe they have a veterinary school, and they'll use it for that. Okay, so there isn't millions in unclaimed scholarships, but there's certainly funds out there that people are not getting enough applications for. And I will tell you, overall, I see this. I can sit in a high school counseling office. I see this all the time. Student comes in, there's a couple students in there, they're looking through the list of scholarships, or however it's produced in that office on a bulletin board or in a notebook. They see that student, they, hey, then they think, okay, well, yeah, okay, and they leave, I've got to get to class. Never go back, and I'll tell you why. They'll say, well, I know Sally has a better GPA than I do. So you know what, she's going to apply to that, I'm not going to apply. Don't do that. Don't self-select out of these things. I can't tell you how many students look at those listings and don't apply to any of them. Okay? They're telling you they're applying, but they're not applying. So apply for everything for which you're eligible. Okay? Don't self-select out. If someone's going to say no, let them tell you no. Don't say no at the beginning. So I'm not going to do that because I saw Sally looking at it. All right? That happens all the time. There's talent-based things. There's essay-based scholarships. Just write us an essay about why you love being in America. There's essays-based things. There's all sorts of things. Definitely things based on career goals. So please make sure you pay attention to that. These are the little pieces that are going to help you fill in your financial aid package. So high school counseling office, guidance office, and an internet search. I'm going to talk to you about some of those websites. Okay, what next? Okay, after you file a FAFSA form online, the students are going to get something back in their email called the Student Aid Report, or SAR, or SAR. You're going to hear SAR a lot, too. And people are going to be, what is that? SAR is a Student Aid Report, okay? On the SAR, it mimics back to you, it produces back to you all the information you input on the FAFSA form, okay? And it will have an estimated EFC listed on the front page. Okay. 2 things. 1, you want to review that SAR for accuracy. I can't tell you how many times people think they put down, the student said, I have $100 on my savings account. And they didn't do it right, and FAFSA says they have $100,000 in their savings account, okay? Review it. Make sure it's accurate. People transpose numbers in their Social Security number all the time, and that is a huge reason they don't match for IRS data, and it's kicked out, and then you're not in the priority group anymore, okay? You've got to get these numbers right, all right? It's no longer based on handwriting. In the old days, it used to be they couldn't read your handwriting. You're typing it in on a computer. Make sure it's accurate. So review the SAR. They're giving you that opportunity. Review it for accuracy. If there's something that needs to be corrected, you note it on this. You go log back in with your FSA ID, you note it on there, and you send it back in. They'll send you back a corrected SAR, okay? Keep that in mind. These details are really important to you getting evaluated fairly for aid, okay? So the college financial aid offices will, and how do they know? Because on the FAFSA, you're going to list the colleges you want the information to go to, okay? So if you're applying to Cal, you're going to list it on there. If you're applying to San Diego State, you're going to list it on there. It's at the end of the FAFSA form, and there's something called a federal school code, and they'll help you look that up. You don't have to memorize it. So they're going to automatically send that information to those colleges you'll list on the FAFSA form. College financial aid offices match the list of admitted students with a list of students who completed all the required financial aid forms and determine the financial aid eligibility, okay? So then they're going to prepare a financial aid package, as they call it, because it'll have many parts to it. That's why they call it a package. For each student, and they'll send notices of that to the admitted students, okay? Generally now, they send it by email. They might be a few still doing it by snail mail, but generally they do it by email. And generally they're doing that anytime between March 1st and April 15th, around there, okay? They're going to compare financial aid packages, and you're going to, that's part of something you're going to do. Consult with your family and decide on a school you're going to commit to by May 1st. Here's what you need to know, a couple other things. Admissions and financial aid at a college are completely separate, okay? People think if they told the admissions office something, the financial aid office knows it. No, okay? Don't assume that. Don't assume that, all right? Admissions decisions are made, generally, if it's the UC system, you're going to know anywhere between March 1st and April 1st. They commit to getting it out by March 31st, but you can know anywhere in that time frame. You might not know till March 31st. And you might get a financial aid notification, only a preliminary one, only a week or two later. You might have 2 weeks to make a decision, okay? That's why part of this important stuff with prior year FAFSA is they're trying to get people to get information in earlier to give you earlier notifications. But admissions offices take time to do their work, and they're racing just to get it out to you by then, okay? If you're in an early awareness application or one of those, it's a little bit different process, but this is the general process, okay? So you don't have a whole lot of time to make decisions. But by the time you're getting to April, your students should have narrowed a lot down. Okay, generally by then they've heard from where they're admitted and where they're not, or if they're waitlisted, okay? You do have to decide on a final school choice by May 1st, and there's something called the Statement of Intent to Register, or SIR, that they require, like the UCs require that by May 1st with a $100 deposit, okay? So you can't say yes to, guess what, they communicate. You can't say yes to 10 schools. There are schools, if they even get a hint of that, they'll drop you from their list immediately, okay? So keep that in mind. A lot of people try to think they're gonna game that, and they tell people that. People still think they're gonna game it, and then they drop them. Keep in mind that offers of admission are provisional. Okay? So are financial aid. What does that mean? That means that when you're offered admission, let's say March 15th from Cal, they're offering that to you on a provisional basis, which means, yes, we want you, but there's one more thing. We need to see your final transcript by July 1st. Because when you applied, it was the fall of your senior year. We have all of your grades for 9th, 10th, and 11th, but for 12th grade, you wrote down what you were expecting to take. Okay, well, there's students who say, I'm expecting to take Calculus AP and drop it. I'm expecting to take Government AP and drop it back to the regular government class, okay? Or Econ and drop back to the regular Econ. In some instances, that will determine whether or not you're gonna be a final admittee or not. There are students who are going to be in even if they change that, and there are students who that puts you on the line and they can say, I'm sorry, we've rescinded. I can tell you just at UC Santa Barbara last year, 400 rescinded admissions. Don't play with that, okay? So what you do is, if your student is making a decision in their senior year to change something in their schedule that they put on the UC app, you need to email the admissions office and you need to disclose it. You would rather disclose it, trust me, than go through the process and find out in July that your offer of admission has been rescinded, okay? I bring that up because financial aid is also provisional, meaning if you filled out the FAFSA by March 2nd, but you did it with estimated tax figures, which is fine, don't hold it to April 15th, to your final ones, if you're doing your taxes later, put on estimated ones. They will take an estimate by March 2nd. But you have to go back and correct those and update it later. Okay? When they get your updated figures, if your EFC dramatically changes, they will change your financial aid package. Okay? That first offer is only provisional. Everybody got that? Okay? So keep that in mind. Things to remember. How many? 4 sources of aid. That's just an easy way to remember. But within those, there's lots of variance, right? The 4th source, outside agency, has a lot of stuff. Financial aid deadline's not flexible. They don't care if you broke your leg. They don't care if your dog died. It doesn't matter. Financial aid deadlines are not flexible. If you didn't turn in your transcript, UC got really tough this last year. If you didn't have your transcripts in by July 1st, your final transcript, a lot of people got cut just for not having it in. Okay, it's competitive. Don't forget these things. Students have to complete a FAFSA every year. Okay, let's talk about extenuating circumstances. The FAFSA asks you information about student and parent income and assets and household. But maybe you're feeling like there's been a change since then. We've separated, we've divorced, that's not what we are now. Somebody just lost a job, that doesn't represent us. Somebody's ill, whatever is going on, okay? Keep in mind that you cannot address those things on the FAFSA form or some Cal Grant form, because there isn't one for Cal Grant, okay? But keep this in mind, the FAFSA has no room for that. No, there's no area where you can write in things, you can't write something on the side, there's no comment field for you. The decisions being made on financial aid packages are made at the college site using that information. So the school that your student wants to attend, or the top 3, if you have some extenuating circumstances as I'm talking about, then you can only appeal that to the college. All right, how do you do that? All right, think about their process. I mean, they have lots and lots of things happening very quickly. So one is the timing on this. As soon as you get a financial aid notification, you can talk about it, but you can talk about it sooner than that, okay? So if your student is planning to attend XYZ university and you already feel like the FAFSA isn't representing your ability to pay for this upcoming year due to some extenuating circumstances, you need to write a statement of that, okay? This should be a factual statement, not an emotional statement. Emotion will not win you an appeal. It needs to be a factual statement. If somebody's lost a job, you need to say, last year my husband made X, he lost his job on X day, we anticipate for this next year he'll make X dollars, he'll be out of work for this long, we think, or he might get on part-time here, or whatever. You need to give them something to hang on to so they can make some decisions. If it's all about emotion, or we're in a tough spot, not gonna work. Sorry, it's not going to work. You need to have extenuating circumstances that are real, and you need to document them. Excess medical expenses, expenses for another child that has special needs, taking care of an elderly parent in some way beyond their expenses. Whatever those things are, you can document those in a factual statement, keep it to 1 page, direct it to the financial aid administrator, email it to the financial aid office. Okay, you can also send it if you like, but they almost do everything by email. If you send them a letter, it may not get to them for a while. Okay, send it on and then follow up and say, and make it polite. Always be polite to people who are deciding your fate with financial aid. Okay, you'll be saying, would you consider re-looking at our financial aid eligibility? Our EFC figure of blank is much higher. You might not have this information. That we'd like you to consider overriding that and revising our EFC. That can only be done at the college site, okay? Don't try to do that with FAFSA or anybody else. All right, so as I say about extenuating circumstances, and if you're planning to use student loans, make sure that you do look ahead, and I'm gonna show you some websites where you can use loan repayment calculators. Students today have the option to have income-based repayment, which students 10 years ago did not have, which is very helpful when you come out of college and you're making a lower income and you're working your way up the ladder. Okay, so you can look at, if we take these loans, what are our payments going to be later? All right, so keeping that in mind. Last couple of important items. Parents, you have to keep your students involved in this process. Okay? Too many parents do this for their students. Stop doing that. Okay? I know everybody thinks I say that and like I'm against parents helping students. Here's the thing, when they go to college and there's something wrong with their financial aid package, they have to go at, you try and call the financial aid office and advocate for them, good luck. okay? They need to solve that problem. If they don't know what's going on with their financial aid package or other things or their FAFSA, they cannot properly advocate to solve that problem. Parents all the time think they're going to pick up the phone and call the college. If it's a small private college, you'll have more success with that. 82% of students in California choose a public college or university in this state. There's reasons for that. We have a lot of excellent ones in this state, okay? And it usually pencils out okay, that people can go. What I'm saying is, you need to involve them in this process. I know family finances can be tricky, but you need to involve them. The other reason you need to involve them is you need to have a realistic discussion. All right, and I'm telling you this from the basis of somebody who's worked for more than 2 decades with thousands of parents and students. You need to have realistic discussions. To some people that means saying, you're not going to that school, you're only starting at a 2-year school, I don't care how good you do, da, da, da. That's not what I mean, okay? There are lots of options. You can start at a 2-year school and transfer, you can go directly to Stanford, you can start at Cal, you can do lots of things, okay? But the point is, what I mean by realistic is, you should not mortgage your family's future or your retirement or your home to give your student the opportunity to go to a private school that will then put you in debt for more than, $100,000 or more, okay? I can tell you that generally what we see is that parents say, dream big, work hard, honey, where do you want to go to school? Give us that list, and inside they're thinking, we'll just have to figure this out, we can get loans, we can get student aid, something that will help us figure this out. The student comes and says, I will die if I don't go to Dartmouth. I will die. My life is over if I don't go to Brown. And you're saying Brown is $60,000, and you're seeing what the aid package is, and maybe it's a good aid package, but maybe it's not, the difference is not something you can afford without taking at least $20,000 or more a year in loans. That's your personal decision, okay? But you need to understand that mortgaging your future, your retirement funds, and all of those things, and your student, because they say they'll die if they don't go to Dartmouth, I'm sorry, you're just going to have a realistic discussion for your family about that. I'm just telling you to think about it. When you talk to your children, you need to say, honey, we want you to work hard and dream big, but we need to have a balanced discussion about the costs of college. I want you to go to the college you want to go to, but we need to make sure it fits financially for us so you can stay there all 4 years and have a great education and not come out with $80,000 minimum, $20,000 a year in debt, okay? You want to figure out, put $80,000 into the income-based recalculator and look at what that will mean. Have these discussions. There are excellent private schools that offer excellent institutional money and can bring that down to the cost of a Cal State or a UC. So don't not apply to them, but be realistic, even at a Cal State or a UC. Look at the income-based and the loan repayment calculators. I really highly encourage you to do that. Loans are not the bad guy, by the way. There are students who are eligible to go to 4-year schools whose families are so afraid of one small student loan that they won't let them start at a 4-year school that would have advanced their career mightily. Okay? So it's about balance. It's about balance. I can tell you, in middle-class families, a lot of them in California, a reasonable balance is about $5,000 of loan a year. Okay? Some take out more than that, which is fine, but definitely $5,000 a year, $20,000 getting out. The California average on the project on student loan debt right now is about $17,500 in debt coming out. We're one of the lowest states in the union for that. Okay? That's because we have an excellent system of colleges in our state, and even the private colleges do fairly well on offering aid, all right? East Coast colleges, people tend to be coming out with most of those scary $80,000, $100,000 levels of debt. But California, you have a lot of options, okay? And you have them even in surrounding states. So don't think that you have to be in that. Have the talk with your student, right? I'm just imploring you to think about, and don't leave them all on their own to do this, but do it together, okay? And students, try actually having the conversation with your parents and welcoming their input, okay? This is someplace where you want their help and their input, all right? So last one is on some handy websites. These are on the handout that I gave you, and I'm sorry, I've been talking a long time. This is the end. So there are great things. The federal website is studentaid.gov, studentaid.ed is Education Department. The FAFSA website's on here, the Cal Grant online portal. There's 2 wonderful websites about California college planning from Like the one that's called California Colleges EDU is from like 7th grade on. It has everything about the A through G course pattern, everything about, has loan calculators, everything. And California Gold Rush is a lot of great information on California state aid. I have listed 3 internet scholarship search engines, SchoolSoup, FastWeb, and scholarships.com, which are national. When you do those, if you get a lot of things, what you do is you fill out a survey, your student fills out a survey, and it's about them, okay? I've had parents fill it out and they start filling it out about themselves. And then what happens is they match you to scholarship things in their database, and you get an email back, and the student's like, I wasn't a nurse, why am I getting this? Because the parent filled it out. So you can sit beside them, but have the student fill it out. They're going to match you with any scholarships in their database, regional, things you wrote about your heritage or attributes, and then they're going to send you the links to apply for those. Couple of hints, think very local and regional. So any that come back that are regional or local, you're going to have a better shot. Lots of people get enamored of things like Coca-Cola Scholars and others. They're like, are you kidding me? They give 100 awards. That's 2 per state, okay? If you have limited time, focus on the ones that are regional or local or that are very closely in your background, your heritage or your interests, okay? Comprehensive Financial Aid Calculators, FinAid or finaid.org is a nonprofit website that has some of the best information for parents. You can compare some college financial aid packages at College Abacus. You can do some college comparison at CAPEX and also at something called Find the Best. And then if you were doing some early planning and you're wondering what to save or how to do that, there's a sheet in your handouts on some of the tax vehicles. But savingforcollege.com is a great resource on 529 plans, but anything about saving for college and how that affects your tax situation, how it affects your students' financial aid. Okay? So that's all of those. That's everything on there that are the best. If you Google scholarships, you're going to get 2.4 million hits. So you might start with some of these. Okay? The last thing I'll say before we go on to questions, which I think you can come up and ask me individually, okay? Because I know some of you have specific questions, is that when you're doing these scholarship searches and doing things on the internet, keep in mind that there are a number of websites out there that are really about collecting your students' email and name or yours and your address simply to market that information, okay? Or to sell it to certain colleges. And you're wondering, why is McCleary University in Tennessee sending us an email we don't even know who they are. They have 600 students. Because you want to be careful where you're signing up and doing all that. You can delete those emails, you can recycle that mail, but do think about where you're putting information out when you're doing these type of searches. Some of them are just selling it, flat out selling it to marketing companies, okay? So, and scholarship scams and all that, the last thing I'll say is anybody asks you to pay for any information online, even to pay, send us $1 for the envelope or whatever, generally those are not the ones you want to do. Okay, generally those are not the ones you want to do. If you want to hire an independent college counselor to help you with these things, you're welcome to do that if you have the resources. I think if you have the resources and very little time, that can be helpful. But I'm telling you, you can do all of it for free yourself, okay, with this information and just staying on top of things, making a financial aid calendar. Okay, I'm done hectoring you. Thanks. I was just going to say, if you have a general question, I'll take specific situation. Yes, sir.
So first, thank you. Regarding the EFC,
Yeah.
so we could be house rich and cash poor.
Right. The FAFSA does not ask you about your house. It won't ask you about your house equity or the FAFSA won't. Yeah.
And are income adjustments made by region?
Yes. No.
No.
Excuse me, no.
So,
But there are some colleges that do that.
pardon me?
There are colleges that do that.
So basically $100,000 in California is the same as $100,000.
On the FAFSA form, yes, in EFC, but there are colleges who will look at a higher level of EFC and acceptable to them because they know that they're in a state where incomes are higher as possible. So just because the EFC is that way doesn't mean the college is the same way.
Thank you.
Yeah. General questions? Okay, and I don't know if Caroline has something she wanted to add before. I'm sorry, yes.
You mentioned that we could information on the website?
I'll let Carolyn answer that. We have a website if we need to email.
If you look, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So if you look on the handout that has the Pedrozzi logo on it, on the very bottom of that, there's the email address, info@pedrozzischolarship.org. Send an email there, and this presentation, we will send it to you. Most of the information that is in this presentation is included on the
It's
four
summarized on
sheets,
that.
summarized in financial aid for post-secondary education.
Any other general questions? Carolyn, did you have something?
Yeah,
Before Tiffany.
Sure, before any individual questions. So great thank you to Colette for that very valuable information. So a couple other things on the same sheet that has the Pedrozzi logo on it. One is I want to let you know that the Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation is one of those local sources of scholarships. Our scholarships are restricted to graduates of the Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District, or if you are a seminarian at St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park and went to high school in Alameda County. Probably not any of those present in this room, and that has to do with Mr. Pedrozzi's will and the restrictions that he set in his will. So make sure to apply for a scholarship if you are eligible. Senior, those will open January 1st and close March 1st. And then also you'll note on the bottom of that same sheet with our logo on the top is a date for a Cash for College event. So that is an event for hands-on help to complete the FAFSA. So did anybody count how many times Colette said, complete the FAFSA and complete the FAFSA by March 2nd? So this is a hands-on event. There will be computers available at Livermore High School. Anybody from the Tri-Valley is welcome to attend that event, and you'll have help to complete the FAFSA as well as the California DREAM Act application if you're an AB 540 student. So Colette's available for individual questions. You can come up if you have any questions for us. And again, I would like to thank Congressman Swalwell for hosting this event in coordination with us this evening. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you for coming. Yes.
So in 2002, when Pedrozzi passed, there was no such thing as the charter school. Is there any thought for the foundation to include the charter school?
So at this point in time, there is not, but as we have, if in the future we have other sources of funding and a broader base of funding from community supporters, that could change in the future. Thank you.